Ladies and gentlemen, Jayson Tatum is 21 years old. My God, is he coming?
From not having enough money to pay for utilities to his mother's home nearly being evicted, Jayson Tatum has really had hard work and overcoming obstacles internalized in him from a very early age. Today I'm going to tell you the whole story of how Jayson Tatum went from rock bottom all the way to being an NBA star. What's going on, everyone? Thank you all for clicking on this video. If you enjoy it, I would really appreciate it if you dropped a like and left a comment. Also make sure to subscribe. Only 1% of you guys that watch my videos are subscribed. It takes less than 5 seconds, and you can always change your mind. I'm spending all my time focusing on the quality of my videos now, so all your support really means the world. So on March 3rd in 1998, Jayson Tatum was born in St. Louis, Missouri. He had 2 siblings, and his father, Justin Tatum, played basketball in college, and he was a gym teacher. Justin Tatum never wanted to be a professional player, and instead he always wanted to be a coach. Jayson Tatum's parents were only teenagers when they had him, and they didn't stick together to raise him, but they both still played huge roles in his life. Jayson was definitely the closest with his mom, whose name was Brandy Cole, and he said, "I wouldn't be who I am today without her love, support, and help, and she's my best friend." Brandy had Jayson when she was still in law school, and she even had to take him to some of the classes. Once Jayson was 6 months old, Brandy would move the two into a small 2-bedroom apartment in St. Louis, and this was in a district known as University City. This apartment wasn't anything special, but it got the job done as a roof over their heads. Now moving on to the well-known story about Jayson. When he was in elementary school, all the kids in his class were asked what they wanted to be when they grew up, and of course, his answer was to be an NBA player. His teacher laughed it off and told him that it was unrealistic and that he needed a plan B, and although to her defense, I don't think what she said was a bad thing, this really made Jayson mad, and even Brandy was livid, and she had to talk to the teacher about it. She said, "I went into the school the next day, I said, with all due respect, if you ask him a question and he answers, I don't think it's appropriate to tell him that's something he can't achieve when I'm at home telling him that anything is possible." The low point of Jayson's life came early on in his childhood. His mother was dealing with unpaid bills and even had the utilities get turned off, but the real worst moment was when they came home one day to see a pink slip taped to the front door. It was an eviction notice, and Jayson later told Bleacher Report that his mom started crying. He said, "I didn't know what to do. I just felt helpless. I wanted to help so bad, but I was only 11 years old." As a common theme in the Tatum family, this tragedy didn't last long, and just a few hours later, Brandy came up with a plan. She applied for a loan modification, and at the last minute, she managed to save their apartment. Even before all this happened, Jayson Tatum knew that he wanted to play basketball. When he was just a little kid, he was going through his mom's school textbooks, and he told her that he never wanted to have to read or do something like that in his life, and he just wanted to be a basketball player, and he worked super hard ever since. Every morning during the school year, Jayson would go into his mom's room at 5:30 in the morning to tell her he was going to the gym for a few hours before he went to school. His father also knew that he had something special in him, because in a league against almost full-grown men, Jayson was averaging nearly 25 points, which is just unreal for the fact that he was only in 5th grade. So again, even though Jayson didn't grow up with his dad, he would call him every day, and they would even spend time together in the locker room at St. Louis University. Eventually, Justin Tatum would begin playing basketball overseas in the Netherlands, and Brandy would take Jayson all the way over there to watch his dad play. When Justin's basketball career was over, he was ready to step in to be Jayson's coach. He taught his son the physicality and toughness needed to play at the next level. Jayson was able to practice with his father about 4 to 5 times a week. Justin's strategy to make Jayson a better player was to match him up against older high school kids and make them go at it. Jayson definitely learned that playing soft wouldn't work while he was undersized. It kind of gave him that dog mentality. Jayson Tatum will even admit now that he may have been pushed a little too hard as a kid, but he understood that his dad was only trying to set him up to be successful, and it obviously worked out in the long run. Jayson's biggest inspiration growing up was Kobe Bryant. He loved watching him play, and even said he was the reason he started playing basketball. His dad took him to a Lakers vs Cavs game where he would end up meeting Kobe. Originally, Justin wanted Jayson to model his game after Kevin Garnett, but Tatum only had his eyes on Kobe. His game really started to develop by the time he was in high school, and he attended Sham College Preparatory School in Missouri. Right away, he was one of the best players on the team. As a freshman, he averaged 13.3 points and 6.4 rebounds per game. In 2013, he was named the Metro Catholic Conference Co-Player of the Year. He led the Red Devils to MCC and 2 Missouri District crowns. As a junior, Tatum averaged 25.9 points, 11.7 rebounds, and 3.4 assists per game, while earning second-team Naismith Trophy All-American honors. In the summer of 2015, he joined a competitive team in St. Louis that played in the Nike Elite Youth Basketball League. On July 11th of that summer, his team defeated future Duke teammate Harry Giles and Team CP3 74-73 in the Nike Peach Jam semifinals with a game-winning buzzer beater to advance to the championship game. Jayson would then score 28 points in the chip. Tatum was taking the world by storm, and everyone was starting to notice his game. Going into his senior season at Sham Prep, he verbally committed to Duke instead of his offers at North Carolina and Kentucky. He was unfair his senior season, putting up multiple 40-point games against guys who would eventually end up getting drafted in the NBA lottery alongside him. Jayson was also invited to play in the 2016 McDonald's All-American game, as well as the Jordan Brand Classic. All of this capped off with him being named the 2016 Gatorade Player of the Year. Jayson started off his career at Duke missing 8 games due to a foot injury, so he had to wait until early December to make his debut, in which he scored 10 points in a blowout win over Maine. He had a pretty solid start to his collegiate career, and right away he won ACC Freshman of the Week. He led Duke to a 5th seed going into the ACC tournament, and Duke went on a run and beat Notre Dame 75-69 to win the championship. Jayson had 19 points and 8 rebounds in that game. Duke then got the 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. They beat Troy in the first round, but unfortunately for Jayson, they had a bad game and lost to South Carolina in a shocking upset in the second round. Even though the season didn't end the way that Jayson had wanted, he already had the attention of NBA teams, so he declared for the NBA Draft. He was invited to the NBA Draft Combine along with over 60 other players, and by the time of the draft, he was a clear top selection. Then, on June 22nd in 2017, Jayson Tatum was drafted 3rd overall by the Boston Celtics. The Celtics actually traded away the number 1 pick to move down to 3, and it's safe to say, this move worked out big time. One of the Tatum's family goals was to never forget where they came from, and when Tatum got drafted, Brandy said he definitely remembers where he came from and what he went through to get here. He remembers several dozen members of his extended family filling up the stands at all his games. He remembers screaming his mom's name, telling her he loved her. When she got her law school degree, he remembers all the difficulties and triumphs of a life that defied all odds. And so when he signed that first NBA contract, Tatum and his mother had a plan. They started a non-profit organization in St. Louis that supports single moms. They made sure to leverage Tatum's influence as well as the influence of other professional athletes who all come from St. Louis. Anyways, getting back to basketball, this was an interesting pick by Boston because the previous year they drafted Jaylen Brown, who was a very similar player, but this did set up their backcourt for the future. The Celtics also acquired Kyrie Irving from the Cleveland Cavaliers after he shockingly requested a trade, and this made the Celtics roster even stronger. Even though the move didn't pan out in the long run, I think it was one that Boston couldn't pass up. In his NBA debut, Jayson recorded a double-double with 14 points and 10 rebounds. Then he scored a season-high 24 points against the New York Knicks, and he was named the Eastern Conference Rookie of the Month in December. 2018 was a solid season for the Boston Celtics and Jayson Tatum, but they knew they were capable of more. The team really struggled with finding their identity, and even though Boston had a successful season, it was clear for Jayson Tatum that Kyrie Irving was holding him back. Tatum was blossoming into something special in just his rookie season. He even had a career high of 28 points in the playoffs against the 3rd seed Philadelphia 76ers. After posting 21 points in a Game 2 victory, he became the youngest player ever to score at least 20 points in 4 straight playoff games at the age of 20 years old, surpassing Kobe Bryant, who accomplished that feat during the 1999 playoffs. The season went all the way to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, where the Celtics would barely lose to LeBron James and the Cavs, but it was a great season for Boston. Even LeBron James acknowledged Tatum's run in the playoffs. He said, "He's built for stardom." Again, although Kyrie Irving was a superstar, he was holding Jayson Tatum back, and things never ended up working out with him in a Celtics uniform. And then, of course, towards the end of the season, the legendary moment happened where Kyrie told all the Celtics fans on national TV that he would be re-signing there, and of course, we all know what happened after that. On July 7th in 2019, Kyrie Irving signed with the Brooklyn Nets to play with Kevin Durant, and this left Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown on their own, which ultimately would unlock their star potential. Heading into the 2019 season, the Celtics still had high expectations. After losing Kyrie, Boston went out and signed Kemba Walker from the Charlotte Hornets to fill out that role. One smaller move they also made was signing Enes Kanter from the Trailblazers. In 2020, the Celtics had another solid season, racking up 49 wins, and they were one of 22 teams to get invited to the NBA bubble. The Celtics beat the number 6 seed Philadelphia 76ers in 4 games. Then they beat the number 2 seed and NBA champion Toronto Raptors in 7 games in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Then the Celtics lost to the 5th seeded Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals in 6 games. The Celtics were a good team, but they were struggling to get past the conference finals and to their ultimate goal. This was the season that Jayson Tatum let the league know who he was. He averaged 23.4 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. 2021 was supposed to be a magical year, one in which the Celtics, after 3 trips to the Eastern Conference Finals in 4 years, got over the hump and back onto the championship stage, all behind the all-star tandem of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Instead, the Celtics were left with more questions than answers. This season mainly boiled down to Boston's inability to find any sort of consistency with its play. Some nights Jayson Tatum and the Celtics looked like elite contenders, then the wheels routinely came off in the 4th quarter. The injury and pandemic woes certainly didn't help the matters, but too often the Celtics didn't play to their potential. The Boston Celtics ended this season with a 36-36 record, and that put them at the 7th seed where they would have to face the Brooklyn Nets. The Celtics lost this series 4-1, and by this time they knew that some things needed to change. One bright spot about this series was that Jayson Tatum erupted for 50 points in Game 3 against the Nets. Even though the Celtics were overmatched in this series, Tatum showed he could go toe-to-toe with the top players in the league like Kevin Durant. Another highlight of the season was Jayson Tatum tying Larry Bird's franchise record with 60 points while willing the Celtics out of a 34-point hole to beat the Spurs in overtime. Anyways, since this was a disappointing season for Boston and they couldn't get over the hump, they had to make a change. Following this season, a jaw-dropping move in the organization happened when Danny Ainge walked away from his post as president of basketball operations, and it was even more shocking when Brad Stevens was promoted to that role while leaving his coaching duties behind. Stevens showed he wasn't afraid to be bold in the early days of his job, flipping Kemba Walker to Oklahoma City in a deal that looked like a home run at the time for Al Horford. Stevens was already trying to build the roster around Jayson Tatum to ultimately reach the goal of the NBA Finals. The Celtics also at this time were in need of a head coach, so they hired Ime Udoka because of his outstanding basketball knowledge and relentless work ethic and experience. So going into the 2022 season, many Boston fans didn't know what to expect. The Celtics made some moves in the offseason to build around Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but after such a disappointing season in 2021, it was a mystery what would happen this season for Boston fans. But little did they know, this was the season they were going to break through to the NBA Finals, but it definitely didn't start out that way. It started off almost looking like a repeat of the season before, but everyone knew they had way too much talent to be 500. They even had a below 500 record of 18-21 at one point. At this time, there was also tons of rumors about the Celtics trading Jaylen Brown and that Tatum and Brown would never work out together, and it's safe to say everyone was wrong. At the time, their own head coach Ime Udoka even criticized the team in a way that Brad Stevens never could. He said, I think everybody's scouting report is to make those guys try to pass the ball. They don't want to pass the ball, and that's something they gotta learn. The season was going so downhill that the Celtics also had to have a player-only meeting, and according to ESPN's Woj, it was not beneficial at all. Basically, what they got out of it is that there were issues with the team and this group that had been going on for a while. Even their fearless leader declared that this team was bad. All the preseason optimism quickly dried up. Even though this meeting didn't go as planned, it may have served as a wake-up call, because instantly the Celtics won 4 out of their next 5 games, but they still were far from where they needed to be. Jaylen Brown then was injured for a stretch of 10 games, and during this stretch, the Celtics got back to playing lazy and uninspiring basketball. Head coach Udoka even said again that the effort and inconsistency was very frustrating at times. They were able to beat bad teams like the Thunder and the Rockets, but as soon as they ran into talent, they would commit an overwhelming amount of turnovers, and that was really a common theme for the whole season. It would also take a 50-point game from Jayson Tatum or Brown to even compete with anyone. Another ESPN writer named Tim Bontemps said, "They're stuck in neutral, maybe going backwards. Jaylen and Jayson aren't making anyone better." He also declared that change felt inevitable. Many fans had lost all hope for the Celtics this year, but oh boy did they respond. It all started on December 31st, a day when Celtics legend Sam Jones passed away at 88 years old. Boston beat a top-ranked Phoenix Suns team, scoring 123 points. This win was considered to be the turning point of the season by many fans. Once again, at this time, the Celtics only had the 12th best odds to win a championship, so that right there shows how big of a turnaround they really had. The Celtics still were losing games, but it seemed at last they found the formula to be able to compete. On January 29th, the Boston Celtics started their longest winning streak of the season, winning 9 straight games. They took their record all the way from below 500 to 34-25. Another thing to mention is that this winning streak happened as soon as Marcus Smart returned from his injury. This may have helped his case to win Defensive Player of the Year. Tatum had struggled with his shooting throughout the season, but over these 13 games, he shot 49% from the field and 38% from 3. This big run capped off with a huge win in a marquee matchup against the 43-21 Memphis Grizzlies with Ja Morant. They won 120-107, and this may have been their statement win of the season. Fast forwarding another 20 games, the Celtics had everything turned around and they were dominating the entire league. The Celtics now had the top defensive rating and the 10th best offensive rating in the NBA. Of course, as always in life, things can't always be perfect. On March 27th against the Timberwolves, Robert Williams tore his meniscus and was announced to miss 6 weeks with a surgery. After this injury, we saw a lot of the media saying that the Celtics were no longer title contenders and they wouldn't be able to stop teams like the Bucks with Giannis, but they were just so wrong. One thing I love about what the Celtics did this year is that they were not afraid to play anyone. They didn't try to avoid teams in the postseason, they were only worried about beating whoever they played. This team really embodied a world-famous quote by Ric Flair that said, "To be the man, you in fact have to beat the man." I don't think anyone has ever seen a team turn around their season so fast like Boston did, but they were able to turn around their 18-21 season all the way to being the number 2 seed in the East. This led the Celtics into a first-round matchup against the Brooklyn Nets with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and the number 1 cheerleader Ben Simmons. Boston was not afraid of the Nets at all, and they went right at them from the jump. They exposed everything wrong with Brooklyn. Game 1 ended with a Jayson Tatum game-winning layup off of blown coverage. The rest of the games were also very close, but all 4 ended up going the Celtics' way. The Celtics also didn't get Robert Williams back until Game 3 in that series, so that just shows how mediocre the Brooklyn Nets really were, and it also shows a weakness in Kevin Durant and how he can't win on his own. Next, the Celtics had their biggest and hardest series ahead of them against Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks. Many analysts gave them no chance with the injuries that Robert Williams was constantly facing. It seemed like there was no way to stop the Greek Freak. Things didn't start off great for the Celtics in this series. They dropped Game 1, but then responded with a win in Game 2. Game 3 was lost on a questionable foul call with Drew Holiday, but this season was all about responding for Boston. Every time they lost a playoff game, they would respond with a big win. So heading into Game 6, they were down 2-3 and it seemed all but over, but of course they were able to respond, and Jayson Tatum dropped 46 points and they were able to get to Game 7 back at home. Game 7 was then the Grant Williams game. He hit 7 threes in what would be the best game of his career. It seemed that the Bucks put all their focus into stopping Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown that they forgot about the role players. Anyways, this win would lead the Celtics to another conference finals, but this time they were looking to win. So looking all the way back, the Celtics were able to turn around a .500 season to make a deep playoff run that led to the finals, and even though they didn't win, it was still an incredible season. Anyways, now the Boston Celtics were headed to Miami to square off against the Miami Heat. It was clear that they had more talent than Miami, but the Heat were a gritty team and they knew how to find ways to win. In Game 1, the Celtics really had no chance because they were dealing with too many injuries, but again, like always, they were able to respond with another huge Game 2 win. The Heat also won Game 3 thanks to Bam Adebayo, but the Celtics responded again with a Game 4 win to even the series at 2-2. Game 5, Boston was able to absolutely lock down the Heat, holding them to 32% from the field. By this point, it looked like the Celtics were headed to the NBA Finals. They had everything figured out. Game 6 was at home, but then Jimmy Butler had an unreal performance and the Heat stole the win in the last few minutes. So now Game 7 was in Miami for all the marbles. Jayson Tatum had yet to prove himself as a clutch player in Game 7s, but as the common theme for this team that I've said throughout the whole video, they were able to respond and get a gutsy win to advance to the NBA Finals. There was definitely some late scares. The Celtics nearly choked a big lead, but thanks to a Jimmy Butler missed three-pointer, the Celtics were able to get it done, and that's all that matters. It was definitely a season to remember for all of Boston, and since they were able to make it to the finals, I think that seals the deal for the greatest turnaround season in NBA history. Although they didn't ultimately win the finals, making it there is still an incredible accomplishment, and I only expect Jayson Tatum to develop more, and eventually I think he can be a top 5 player in the NBA. In conclusion, Jayson Tatum has had one of the most crazy inspiring come-ups to NBA stardom. From nearly being homeless to becoming an NBA superstar, his story will be talked about for a long time. That's going to be the end of this video. This one took a long time to plan out and make, so I would really appreciate all your support. Also comment below what player you want me to make a video on next. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, I'll see you all later.
Hi, I'm Jayson Tatum, recording live. Today I'll be showing you how to tie a forehand knot. This is how you start off. Narrow it go down here. Grab it, narrow it under your line once, and then you do that twice. Then you bring it up through the hole right here under your chin. Just like that. And then you go back and put this on as such. And then now all you do